Good evening. How's everybody doing? Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house on a Tuesday night going into Wednesday, Yom Revi'i? Sharon in New Jersey, Lucy in Minnesota, Shandor in the Bronx, Bella in Florida, Paul in the Great Northwest says, here, where else would I be? Amen. Paula loves the music. Joseph in Massachusetts, Melissa in Great Neck. Joseph says, may more hostages return. Amen. Amen. Please, God, I'm praying every day, 3 times a day. Please, God, restore all the hostages, heal everyone who's sick, and end the war and bring a secure and lasting peace back to the Holy Land. We say amen. Jonathan in Southern California. Joe in the Inland Empire. Marjorie says shalom. Aoife in Florida. And Lynn in Silver Spring. Welcome, everybody. Okay. I'm calling it a double daf, but we won't do a whole 2 pages. It'll be more like 1.5, and set us up to sort of complete the 1.5 tomorrow. At any rate, we'll be 2 pages ahead. And that way, since there's no class on Friday and no class on Saturday, because Nina and I are going on a shul event, a Shabbaton, so then Sunday night, God willing, when we resume, we'll be right on the schedule. Okay, we are opening chapter 3 here on page 27a in Tractate Bava, Kamma, the 21st volume of the Talmud. Continuing the law, the discussion of damages, right? Chapter 1 opened by saying the ox, and that includes eating, trampling, and goring, the pit, the fire, and a person directly causing damage to another. These are the 4 primary categories. And then everything else we learn out from that in terms of causing damages to another person, where you become liable to pay for the damages that you caused. Mishna number 1 here in chapter 3. In the case of one who places a cad, which is a type of vessel, in the public domain, and another person comes and stumbles on it and breaks the vessel. So the other person is exempt from paying what he broke. And if the one who stumbled incurred damages by it, well, then the owner of the havit, which is another word for a vessel, is liable to pay restitution for his damage. So that's the Mishnah. And the bottom line is we're talking about somebody created a hazard in the public domain that wasn't a hazard that was moving around, and that's what makes it similar to a pit, right? It's like you dug a pit in the public domain and somebody comes along and falls in it. Or if you leave your clay jug in the street where somebody's going to come along and trip over it and hurt themselves, it's the same idea. You created a hazard and somebody got hurt. But because there's a vessel that's capable of being broken, so it's a little bit different than the pit in that now there's another question. What if the vessel gets broken? Can I say, hey, this guy who came walking along on the street and, kicked my vessel and broke it, he should pay me for the vessel of mine. It's my property and he broke it. He should pay me. Is that ever going to work? Is that ever going to happen? Isn't the obvious argument, why'd you leave your clay jug lying in the street where somebody could stumble over it and get hurt? How could you possibly expect that they're going to pay you? Well, let's stay tuned to see what the circumstances are, because of course, the different situation can produce a different result. Here's the Gemara on Mishnah number 1 here in chapter 3. The Mishnah began its presentation of the case in reference to a cad, right? The vessel was a cad. But now at the end of the Mishnah, it referred to a havit. So why do we switch from a cad to a havit? What does it mean? Well, we learned that this interchanging of the words cad and havit, not harvit, but havit, in a Mishnah on page 31b as well. If two people were walking down the street, this one coming with his havit and the other one coming with his crossbeam, and this one's cad was broken by that one's crossbeam, then the one holding the beam is exempt. Well, in that Mishnah also, the language changed from a cad to a havit, right? I mean, started with a havit and ended with a reference to a cad. The real question was, well, somebody's carrying a big beam of wood. Somebody else is carrying a breakable vessel, like a clay jug, and the beam breaks the vessel. But why is it that in that Mishnah, like in this Mishnah, we start by talking about one of these terms, the cad or the havit, and then finish talking about the other? Are we to understand that these words are interchangeable? They both refer to a clay vessel, and it doesn't matter which term you use. Is that what we are to understand? And we also saw this in another Mishnah on page 115a as well. And that Mishnah says, if this person came with his havit of wine, and that person came with his cad of honey, and the havit of honey, which is more valuable, cracked, and this person poured out his wine and saved the honey by collecting it into his vessel, so he receives reimbursement only for his trouble. And he cannot claim the value of the wine that he poured out, since the owner of the honey did not tell him to do so. Interesting case. We'll come to it in a few months. The question now is, why in these three Mishnayos does the language switch from cad to havit, seemingly intending to show that the word doesn't matter? It's the same thing. But why make the change then? Why not just stay with the same vessel, with the same word? So Rav Papa said these examples show that a cad is the same as a havit, and the two words are used interchangeably. So the Gemara asks, well then, why have two words? With regard to what does this make a difference? Well, it makes a difference for buying and selling. If a customer asks for a havit, intending a large vessel, and the seller gives him a cad, which is a smaller vessel, the buyer cannot claim that he did not receive the item that he asked for. So what we're learning here is that a cad and a havit are not the same, but they're close to the same, right? They're both vessels. They're both approximately the same size, and the havit is just a little bit bigger, right? So, it's a little bit bigger. Like one's 750 milliliters and the other one is a liter. They're both bottles of whiskey. One's a little bigger. But in terms of the law of breaking and damages, they're going to usually produce the same result. Where is it different? In the law of buying and selling. If you said, I want to buy a havit, and somebody gave you a cad, you're like, hey, I paid for the larger vessel. But when we're talking about who broke whose vessel, it doesn't really matter. So the Gemara asks, what are the circumstances where this difference between the cad and the havit are relevant? If we say that it is with regard to a locale where people do not refer to a cad as a havit, nor do they refer to a havit as a cad, and the havit is understood to be referring to a larger vessel, so clearly one who asks for a havit does not wish to buy a cad, as people do not call it that. And the Gemara answers, well, no, it is necessary to teach that they are equivalent terms with regard to a locale where most people call a cad and a havit, i.e. most people use the term cad for the smaller vessel and the term havit for the larger one. But in that same locale, there are also people who call a havit a cad and a cad a havit, not distinguishing between the two terms, right? So in other words, in an area, Most people distinguish between the two vessels. Some people use the terms interchangeably. So lest you say that the law follows the majority and the seller and the buyer must accept this distinction, the Mishnah teaches us that the court does not follow the majority with regard to monetary matters. And in cases of uncertainty, the burden of proof rests upon the claimant. That is a general principle that we find in the Talmud. If you are suing me to recover some money that you say you are owed, the burden of proof is on you. So in a case of uncertainty, you're going to have to show that there was enough certainty for your claim to hold water. And we're not going to just say that, well, the majority of the people use the language in this way, when in fact some people use it differently, and that could have created the uncertainty. We're on page 27b. Now, the Mishnah teaches concerning, let's get back to our Mishnah, right? The idea of creating a hazard in the public domain by leaving a vessel there. The Mishnah teaches concerning the vessel placed in the public domain. If another person came and stumbled on it and broke it, he is exempt. And the Gemara asks, why is he exempt? Although this happened in the public domain, he should examine the road and then continue walking, right? He should look where he's going. Okay, it's the public domain. I was tired. I was carrying a big clay jug. I put it down. I sat down to take a rest. A guy comes along, he kicks my clay jug and breaks it. Maybe I'm really poor. Maybe that jug held oil, which was very valuable, and this represents a fortune lost to me. And some guy comes along and kicks it, and I have no say, I have no claim. I can't say, hey, he broke my jug. I mean, if he could have easily walked around it, but instead he kicked it, why not say, hey, he was negligent when he broke my vessel? And the sages of the school of Rav said in the name of Rav, the ruling of the Mishnah, right, which says that the one who kicked the vessel is exempt, is taught with regard to one who placed not just one barrel in the road, but rather filled the entire public domain with barrels, blocking the path. Since the public domain belongs to everyone, a pedestrian is entitled to traverse the road, even if traversing it necessitates breaking the vessels. And Shmuel says the ruling of the Mishnah is taught with regard to a case where he broke it in the dark, right? So now what we're saying is, whoa. No, if he negligently kicks my thing where he could have easily walked around it, he will be liable. And what the sages are now saying is that they're going to limit the application of the Mishnah to a case where if I block the entire road with my clay vessels, and somebody, in order just to walk through, has to kick one of them out of the way and it breaks, then he's exempt because I blocked the whole road. Or Shmuel is going to say, well, if this happened in the dark where the guy, had no option, he couldn't see it in order to step around it. But that means that in the normal course of things, where it would be easy for him to look where he's going and avoid kicking my jug, he is going to be liable. Right, Shmuel says that the ruling of our Mishnah, he's limiting it, saying that it was taught with regard to a case where it broke in the dark. Therefore, he could not have avoided breaking the barrel by examining the road in front of him. Rabbi Yochanan says the ruling of the Mishnah is taught with regard to a case where the barrel was placed at the corner of the road, and so the pedestrian could not have seen it as he rounded the corner before stumbling on it. In other words, where I put it in the public domain matters. If I put it in a place that's obvious and easy for people to walk around it, and they break it anyway, then they are going to be liable to repair my vessel that they broke. But if I leave it in a place where somebody coming around the corner has no reason to expect there's going to be a clay jug in the street, and he kicks it accidentally, that's on me, not on him. Rav Papa said the Mishnah is precise only according to either the explanation of Shmuel or that of Rabbi Yochanan, but not that of Rav. As if the Mishnah is explained in accordance with the explanation of Rav, what is the reason that it refers specifically to a case where one stumbled on the barrel? Even if he broke the barrel intentionally, he should not be liable to pay, as the owner of the barrel had no right to block the public road. Right? The Mishnah said stumbled, that the guy stumbled on it. if I really laid all my jugs across the street so that no people couldn't pass, then even if they kicked it intentionally, they're not going to be liable. But the Mishnah said stumbled. So it must be that either I put my jug out there where people might stumble over it at night, right, in the dark, or near a corner where they're going to come around it. So I, as the jug's owner, I created the hazard, and that's why they're not going to be liable when they stumble over it. Rav Zevit said in the name of Rava, in defense of Rav's explanation, saying that this is where the owner of the jug blocked the whole street with jugs, the same is true even if he broke the barrel intentionally. And as for this fact that the Tan of the Mishnah teaches a case where the person stumbled, it is because he wants to teach in the last clause, and if he incurred damage due to the vessel, the owner of the havit is liable to pay for his damage, as this ruling applies specifically when he stumbled. But if he broke the barrel intentionally and incurred damage in the process, then the owner of the barrel is not required to compensate him. Right, so far, I left my jug out there, and we've been asking, right, if somebody comes along and breaks my jug, do I have any claim to collect from him for breaking my jug? But of course, the bigger question is, what if the one who stumbles over the jug gets hurt? Then it's really like a pit that I dug and somebody fell into it. He stumbles over and he gets hurt. I'm going to owe that person damages. But according to this view, if it was visible, right, it was easy to walk around, or even if the street was filled with my jugs, and if somebody makes the decision to purposely break my jug, okay, now he's not going to have to pay me for my jug that he breaks because I left it in the public domain, I created a hazard, maybe I even blocked the public domain. But what if once he makes the decision to break my jug, he hurts himself while doing it? Do I owe him damages because he hurt himself while breaking my jug? This is a little bit like, let's say I park my car in front of your driveway. So you decide to tow my car. Makes sense. You have a right to do that. I'm blocking your driveway. In towing my car, which you decide to do yourself, and you're not so handy, and so you attach a chain to my car and one to your car just to move it out of the way, and in doing that, you hurt yourself. Now, no one told you to tow my car yourself. You should have called a tow truck. Now that you hurt yourself, yes, the inciting incident was I parked my car in front of your driveway. But you took it on yourself to literally, physically tow the car yourself, and you hurt yourself. Am I liable for your injury? At least according to this view, no, because you were the dummy who tried to tow the car yourself. That was on you, not on me. At least according to Rav Zevit, in the name of Rava, defending Rav's view that this was an intentional breaking after the person blocked the way. Now, Rabbi Abba said to Rav Ashi that this is what they say in the West, meaning Eretz Yisrael, compared to the Jewish community in Babylonia, in the name of Rabbi Ula, in explanation of the Mishnah. Even if the barrel is clearly visible, one who stumbles on it is exempt from liability, because the typical manner of people is not to examine the roads, right? People walk all the time daydreaming. They're not so careful. If they have an expectation that a road is clear, they might easily not notice that there's somebody's clay jug sitting in the street, as they assume that the road is unobstructed. Therefore, one who breaks an item placed in the road as a result of not watching is not liable to pay restitution. The Gemara relates there was an incident in Nehardea where a pedestrian stumbled on a jug in an open area and he broke it. And Shmuel deemed him liable to pay for the damage. The one who broke the jug. Somebody else left their jug in the public domain. Somebody came along and broke it. And Shmuel finds him liable. Surprise, surprise. And a similar incident took place in Pumbedisa. And Rava deemed the person liable to pay. I thought we were saying I negligently left my jug in the public domain. Somebody comes along and breaks it. I actually have a claim against that person? Really? Now the Gemara asks, granted, Shmuel ruled in accordance with his halakhic opinion that the exemption stated in the Mishnah refers specifically to a case where one stumbles in the dark, as otherwise he is liable for breaking the barrel, since he should have examined the road. But with regard to Rava, shall we say that he holds in accordance with Shmuel's opinion that one who breaks an item in the public domain is exempt from paying for it only if it was in the dark? And Rav Papa said that inference is not necessary, as this incident was at the corner where there was an olive press, where it is known that people put their jugs down while waiting for oil. Consequently, since they were acting with permission, a pedestrian should examine the road and then continue walking. So there's some kind of a reasonableness standard operating here, right? There's some kind of reasonable expectation, particularly if you're in a public thoroughfare that's near a well, right? Or near an olive press. And lots of people are bringing their jugs and waiting to have access to the well or to the olive press. And while they're waiting, they have their jug in the street. And somebody walks through an area like that and is so careless as to break people's jugs, well, he is going to be liable to pay for that reason. Rav Chisda sent the following question to Rav Nachman. The sages said that when one strikes another, one person literally hits another, and not just hurts him from the pain of the punch, let's say, but also humiliates him because he struck him in a public place. So the judges determine liability according to the following formula. For kneeing him, right, hitting him with your knee, so the attacker must pay 3 sela. If you kick him with your foot, you pay 5 sela. For punching him, you pay 13. So the Gemara asks, for hitting him with the handle of a hoe and for hitting him with the top of a hoe, then what amount is he liable to pay him? Now remember, I'm not sure exactly why we changed the subject, but now we're talking about not the damage that he incurs, like that his body is now damaged, right? And we're not talking about the pain and suffering, loss of livelihood, medical bills. Now we're talking about the specific case of indemnity of humiliation. Right? So a knee is worth less than a kick, and a kick is worth less than a punch. And now, in terms of humiliation cost, and now we're saying, what about if I hit you with a hoe, either with the stick of the hoe or with the top of the hoe? And Rav Nachman sent the following response. Chisda, are you collecting a fine for humiliation in Babylonia, where judges are not authorized to collect fines? Tell me how the incident itself transpired, right? And so we have later, it says, are you collecting a fine? Indemnity for humiliating someone is not a fine. Yet the sages of Babylonia were not ordained by the ordained sages in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore could impose payment of an indemnity only for cases of damage that they were empowered to judge as agents of the sages in Eretz Yisrael. And they were not empowered to impose payment of fines. Since humiliation involves no financial loss, it is akin to the category of fines, right? When you're humiliated, you have suffered something that you can be compensated for in certain cases of damages, but not every court is authorized to levy those damages for humiliation because it's not measurable as a financial loss. Now, the argument is, well, what are you talking about? You said that the knee is worth 5, the punch is worth 13. Well, what's the hoe worth? We're not sure, and maybe that's why you can't impose it. So tell me what, Rav Nachman says, Chisda, tell me how the incident transpired. So Rav Chisda sent him in response. There is a certain cistern belonging to 2 people whose arrangement was to alternate its use so that every day one of them would draw water from the cistern on his day, when it was his turn. Now it happened that one of them came and was drawing water on a day that was not his turn. His co-owner said to him, "This is my day to draw, not yours." But his colleague did not pay attention to him. So the person whose turn it was, therefore, took the handle of a hoe and struck the person who was stealing his water, who then sued for damages. So the assumption here is that the two people own the cistern, that it doesn't produce enough water for both of them to draw every day, so they take turns. And the one who it wasn't his turn came and took water on the wrong day. The other one said, hey, it's my day, you can't do that. The guy didn't listen, and so the one whose turn it was hit the other guy with his hoe, with the handle of his hoe. He took justice into his own hands. And now we're going to start a somewhat extended discussion on, is it permitted to be a vigilante? Is it permitted to take justice into your own hands when you are the damaged party? Can you take justice into your own hands? So Rav Nachman said to him, well, in that case, the one who hit was right to do so, and he should have hit him even 100 times with the hoe. Even according to the one who says that a person may not take justice into his own hands, but rather should go to court, in a case where there would be a loss involved if no immediate action is taken, a person may take justice into his own hands, right? The cistern only produces enough water for one of them to draw each day. So if somebody takes on the wrong day, that other guy's not going to have water for his household. It's a serious matter. And this is, as it was stated, as Rav Yehuda says, a person may not take justice into his own hands, whereas Rav Nachman says a person may take justice into his own hands. Where did the law end up on this, even before we read the rest of the discussion? If one sees something that belongs to him in another's possession, he may take justice into his own hands and take what is rightfully his, even by the use of force. For example, striking the other person if he stands in his way. Very interesting, not intuitive, and perhaps certainly not legal in California, right? Where somebody's stealing your stuff, you can't punch him, hit him. You certainly can't kill him if he's committing a property crime against you. You can't take the law into your own hands about that. Now, if you call the police, what's going to happen? Absolutely nothing. We have a terrible, terrible, flawed justice system here in California at the present time. Property crimes are just going through the roof, and this is the reason, right? Because we don't have to get into the politics of it, but the fact is, and we have a friend who's a prosecutor who is just furious and has told us that her colleagues are furious too because they're not able to enforce the law. And because they're not able to enforce the law, many, many more crimes are happening. So maybe this wasn't such a bad idea, that if you see somebody stealing your stuff, you can hit them and get your stuff back. Now that's where the law ended up. Let's continue the discussion. So where there is an imminent loss that will be suffered if the injured party does not take action, everyone agrees that a person may take justice into his own hands. They disagree only where there is no imminent loss that will be suffered. Rav Yehuda says that a person may not take justice into his own hands because since there is no loss, he should go before the judge to have him enforce the law. Rav Nachman says that a person may take justice into his own hands since he is acting lawfully, as he is clearly in the right. He need not trouble himself to go before the judge to have him enforce the law. Now, even according to Rav Nachman, the guy that you hit, right, when you're enforcing the law to make sure that he doesn't steal your stuff, he might sue you. He might bring you to court. Right? You know, I'm a licensed security guard as a volunteer to protect my synagogue. Several of us carry guns. Terrible that we should leave in such times when that's considered necessary. But our organization drills into us over and over and over and over again that even if you do the right thing, even if there was, we can only pull that gun to save lives, right? But even if somebody's coming with a weapon and it looks like it's some kind of terrorist entering our synagogue who wants to kill people, and we shoot him, expect a lawsuit. expect a lawsuit afterwards. The chutzpah of these evil people is unlimited. And so, after the case, you better be able to prove that you were justified in doing what you did, right? So here, Rav Nachman is saying, okay, somebody's stealing your stuff. You can hit him to stop him stealing your stuff. But that guy might bring him before a court. And if the one who's so certain of his rights that he took up a cudgel and struck the alleged thief, what if he was wrong? What if it turned out he thought his stuff was being stolen, but in fact, this person was legitimately taking his own property, and the one who ends up hitting, he made the mistake. Well, he is going to be liable for quite a bit of damages in a situation like that. So don't be so quick to be the vigilante. No. Rav Kahana raises an objection to Rav Yehuda's opinion based on a baraisa. Ben Bagbag says, do not enter another person's courtyard secretly to take what is rightfully yours without permission, lest you appear to him as a thief trying to steal his property. Rather, break his teeth. Meaning, take it by force and say to him, I am taking what is mine. Evidently, one may take justice into his own hands. Interesting ruling. He's saying don't sneak onto the property. Announce yourself. If you are sure that your property, which was stolen, is now sitting on somebody else's property, don't sneak in there to take it because you might get shot as a thief. Say, I am here to take my property. He's not saying break that guy's teeth, but he is saying announce yourself and don't do it secretly. Rav Yehuda said to him, you can keep this question to yourself as it poses no difficulty at all. Ben Bagbag states an individual opinion in this regard, and the rabbis disagree with him. Rabbi Yanai says, and now we're on page 28a, Rabbi Yanai says in an alternative response to Rav Kahana's objection, what does the Baraisa mean by the phrase break his teeth? It means in judgment, right? Bring him to court, not literally break his teeth. The Gemara asks, if so, the subsequent statement in that baraisa, and say to him, this is inaccurate. It should have stated, and they, the court, say to him. Likewise, the wording, I am taking what is mine, this is inaccurate, since it is the court who makes this statement. The baraisa should have stated, he is taking what is his, and the Gemara concludes, indeed, this poses a difficulty to Rav Yehuda's version of the response. So the Gemara suggests, come in here an alternative proof for Rav Nachman's opinion, that one can take the law into his own hands. That baraisa didn't work well. So let's look for a different proof. It is stated in a baraisa with regard to an ox that climbed on the back of another ox in order to kill it. And the owner of the ox on the bottom came and removed his ox. And the ox on top consequently fell and died. So the owner of the ox on the bottom is exempt from paying for the dead ox. Simpler, maybe visual, is I'm on my property. I have my ox on my property. Your ox enters my property and is charging toward my ox. Looks like it's going to gore my ox and kill it. I pull out my shotgun. I kill your ox. I have killed your ox. It was on my property. Can I kill your ox just because it was trespassing? Probably not. But here, I viewed a situation where my ox was in imminent danger of being killed by your ox. So I defended my ox by killing your ox. Sounds like that's okay. I can do that, right? I am exempt from damage toward you because I took justice into my own hands to protect my ox from your charging ox. And what? Is this ruling not stated with regard to a case where the attacker is a forewarned ox, a muad? Your ox even has a history of goring other oxen. Where there is no loss to the owner of the bottom ox, since even if the owner of the ox on the bottom does not remove his ox, he will eventually receive full restitution from the owner of the belligerent ox. Like if I let your ox charge and kill my ox, even in the public domain, if yours is a forewarned ox and he kills my ox, you're going to have to pay me the full value of my ox. And yet I could still do this. I can still kill your ox first. And yet he is exempt from paying restitution for causing the death of the belligerent ox Evidently, he has the right to take justice into his own hands. We're trying to prove Rav Nachman's point that you can take justice into your own hands. But the Gemara rejects this proof. No, the ruling is with regard to a case where the attacker is a tam, an innocuous ox that has no history of attacking other oxen, where there is a loss for the owner of the ox on the bottom if he does not save it, since the owner of the innocuous ox will pay for only half the damages resulting from his ox's attack. All the more reason why I would want to kill your ox rather than let it kill mine. The Gemara asks, if so, the latter clause of that baraisa, if instead of removing his own ox, the owner of the ox on the bottom pushed the one on top and it died, he is liable. And if it is referring to an innocuous ox, why is he liable? He is defending his property so as not to incur a loss. The Gemara answers he is liable because he should have removed his ox from underneath the belligerent ox, and he did not remove it. Instead, he pushed the belligerent ox and caused it to die. Although one may take justice into his own hands, if he damages another person's property when he could have protected his own property in a harmless manner, he is liable. So now they're saying the circumstance is a little different than the way I was explaining it. Not your ox is in the middle of charging at my ox, and if I wait another second, my ox is dead. But rather, your ox entered my property. Your ox is known to be a belligerent ox. So my ox is in danger, but he's not charging. So I could just put my ox in the barn, and then I will not incur a loss. If instead I shoot your ox so that it won't harm my ox, then I'm liable because I had a choice. I could have protected my ox, my property, without killing yours. Since I didn't exercise that choice, maybe I am liable for killing your ox. The Gemara answers, he is liable because he should have removed his ox from underneath the belligerent ox and he did not remove it. Instead, he pushed the belligerent ox and caused it to die. Although one may take justice into his own hands if he damages another person's property when he could have protected his own property in a harmless manner, then he is liable. The Gemara suggests, come in here, a different proof for Rav Nachman's opinion from a baraisa. With regard to one who fills another person's courtyard with jugs of wine and jugs of oil, the owner of the courtyard may break his way through them and exit his courtyard, or he may break his way through them and enter his courtyard. Since the one who put the jugs there had no right to do so, the owner of the courtyard may take justice into his own hands. And this is apparently the ruling, even where there is no loss involved to the owner of the courtyard. Right? I surround your house with my jugs. For you to leave your house, you're going to have to break my jugs. It seems pretty obvious that you're not going to owe me anything for breaking my jugs, which I deposited on your property without permission. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said in response that the baraisa can be explained a little bit differently. The owner of the courtyard may break the jugs and exit to go to court, and he may break the jugs and enter the house to bring proof of his rights, i.e. documents proving that the courtyard belongs to him. Since by refraining from doing so, he would sustain a loss, he may break the jugs when exiting and entering. But he may not take justice into his own hands beyond this extent. Therefore, no proof for Rav Nachman's opinion can be inferred from this baraisa. Interesting, right? According to this view, even if I put a bunch of my jugs on your property, you could easily walk around them. And you can take me to court and have me remove the jugs. But just because they're on your property doesn't give you the right to break all of my jugs, as long as I'm not blocking you exiting and entering your house. Even if I am, okay, so you break the jugs that prevent you from entering and exiting, but you don't have to break all of them. The Gemara suggests, come in here, a different proof from a baraisa, still trying to prove Rav Nachman's law that you can take justice into your own hands. From where is it derived with regard to a Hebrew slave who had his ear pierced with an awl to extend his tenure as a slave, but whose days of servitude have now ended with the arrival of the Jubilee year? Right? So let's remember this. We've seen it before. The difference between Hebrew slaves and Canaanite slaves. Canaanite slaves, when slavery was practiced 2,000 years ago, that was a permanent slave. A Hebrew slave is a Jew who stole or who got into debt and couldn't pay back or couldn't pay. And so he sells himself into slavery, normally for a period of 6 years. When his tenure as a slave ends, the Torah says he can say, it's better for me serving my master. I have a good bed, I have a good home, I like the people here. My master provided me with a Canaanite slave woman. I married her. This is now my family. I want to stay here. So if he wants to stay, he can have his ear pierced in a doorway so that he becomes a permanent slave. But he doesn't become permanent just until the next Yovel, the next Jubilee year, which would come every 50 years. So it might be that there were only 10 years left until the next Jubilee. So he's saying, I'm going to remain a slave, for an extra 10 years. Okay, well, the 10 years end. And now what? He goes free. Does he want to become a slave again? I mean, maybe he wants to, but they're going to have to work that out. And maybe the master doesn't want him around anymore. You know what? It's like, enough. You didn't do such great work. I have to feed you. I have to keep you around. I don't want you here. Goodbye. Go. I don't want you as my slave anymore. So what happens? The Yovel has come. The servitude has ended. And his master is urging him to leave. But the Hebrew slave insists on remaining. And so the master injures the slave and inflicts an injury on him in the process of forcing him out. Well, is the master going to be liable for this injury? I mean, the guy is free and doesn't want to leave the master's property. So really, at that point, he's just like anybody who's trespassing on the master's property, and the master's trying to get him off the property. So if the guy won't leave and the owner of the property is pushing him off and the guy gets hurt, is the owner of the property liable? California, probably, but not according to this. So, is it that the master is exempt from paying for his injury? So to counter this, the verse states, you shall take no ransom that he should return. Numbers 35:32. Now, this verse is actually referring to the prohibition against the manslaughterer, right, the unintentional killer, paying a ransom instead of going to a city of refuge, right? If somebody is not an intentional murderer, but it's not fully accidental, there's some aspect of negligence, so he has to go to a city of refuge. And he can't, instead of going to the city of refuge, pay a ransom to the family of the one who died. He can't do that. He has to go to the city of refuge until the next Kohen Gadol dies. So until the Kohen Gadol dies, that's when that ends, right? That exile. So that's what this idea, you shall take no ransom, is referring to, the manslaughter. But this verse is also interpreted to mean that you shall take no ransom for a Hebrew slave who is obligated to return to his family. In other words, if the slave refuses to return to his family and he is injured in the process of his eviction, he does not receive compensation. And this seems to indicate that the master may take justice into his own hands, even for a matter that involves no loss to him, seemingly proves Rav Nachman's contention. But the Gemara responds with, what are we dealing here? We are dealing with a slave who is a thief. And consequently, if he remains a slave, the master will sustain a loss. Therefore, it is permitted for the master to take justice into his own hands and evict the slave by force, right? The nuance is, you can take justice into your own hands to prevent yourself from incurring a loss, but not if you're not, right? So if the jugs surrounding your house are blocking you from coming in and out, you can break the jugs that block you from entering your house. But the rest of the jugs on the property, you don't have a right to break them because they're not causing you a loss. You can go to court and have them, have the court arrange for the owner to remove them, right? So what we haven't settled is, can you take justice into your own hands when it doesn't involve a matter of imminent loss? Rav Nachman bar Yitzhak, So the Gemara questions this explanation. Well, until now, he did not steal this slave that you're trying to get rid of, but he wasn't a thief before, and now he will begin to steal? Why would the master be worried about this just when the slave's tenure ends? Right? We know he wasn't stealing before, because if he was stealing before, the master could have got rid of him then. So the Gemara answers, until now, while he was still a slave, the awe of his master was upon him, so he did not steal. But now that he may go free, he does not have the awe of his master upon him, and the master is therefore worried that he might steal from him, and that's why he wants to get rid of him. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said an alternative explanation. The Baraisa is referring to a slave whose master provided a Canaanite maidservant to him as a wife, and he wishes to remain with her. Until now, it was permitted for him to engage in sexual intercourse with her, but now that he is free, it is prohibited for him to do so. In this case, his master may evict him forcefully, assuming the role of an emissary of the court to prevent this former Hebrew slave, right, who's a Jew, from having extramarital sex with that Canaanite slave woman. He could do that while they were both slaves of the same master, but he can't do that now that he's free. And that's why the owner, the former owner of the Hebrew slave and current owner of the Canaanite maidservant, can evict that former Hebrew slave. And he's not taking justice into his own hands so much as acting as an officer of the court to prevent the Jew from transgressing with the Canaanite slave woman. Now, the Gemara suggests a proof for Rav Yehuda's opinion from the Mishna. Come in here. In the case of one who places a jug in the public domain, and another person comes and stumbles on it, right? We're back to our actual Mishnah, and he breaks it, right? The one who stumbles on it and breaks the jug that was left in the public domain, he is exempt. Now, it may be inferred that the reason he is exempt is that he stumbled on it. But if he broke it intentionally, then he is liable for breaking it. This indicates that one may not take justice into his own hands. Rav Zevid said in the name of Rava, that is not a proof. As the same is true, even if he broke the barrel intentionally. And as for the fact that the Tan of the Mishnah teaches a case where the person stumbled, it is because he wants to teach in the last clause, and if he incurred damage due to the vessel, the owner of the havit is liable to pay for his damages, as this ruling applies specifically when he stumbled. But if he broke the barrel intentionally and incurred damage in the process, the owner of the barrel is not required to compensate him. Although the pedestrian had the right to break the barrel, it is he who damaged himself by not being careful while breaking it, right? If you personally tried to tow my car yourself because I was blocking your driveway and you hurt yourself while doing that, I may be liable, for your cost of towing, but I'm not going to be liable for your injury that you hurt yourself when you decided to tow my car yourself. It is he who damaged himself by not being careful while breaking it. Therefore, in the first clause, the Mishnah teaches about the man who stumbled. Now, the Gemara suggests, come in here a proof from a Baraisa, which relates to the case of a woman who, during a fight between her husband and another man, grabs the other man's genitals. Right? This is an actual verse in the Torah. Now, we're still looking at, can you take justice into your own hands? So this is Deuteronomy 25:12, where it says, then you shall cut off her hand. Now, this should not be taken literally. Rather, it is referring to monetary restitution. So what? Is it not referring to a case where she cannot save her husband from his attacker by him any other means than grabbing the attacker's genitals? And nevertheless, she is punished? So this indicates that one may not take justice into his own hands. And the Gemara answers, no. The verse is referring to a case where she can save him by other means. Otherwise, she is fully exempt from paying restitution. The Gemara asks, but if she cannot save him by other means, is it possible that she is exempt? If so, instead of teaching in the latter clause of that Baraisa that the expression mentioned in the previous verse, quote, and extended her hand, excludes an emissary of the court who is authorized to act in this manner and is therefore exempt from paying restitution, that Baraisa should have distinguished and taught within the case under discussion in the verse itself like this. In what case is this statement that the wife is liable said? It is said in a case where she can save her husband by another means. But if she cannot save him by other means, she is exempt. And the Gemara answers that is also what the Baraisa is saying. In what case is this statement said? It is said in a case where she can save him by other means. But if she cannot save him by other means, her hand is rendered like an emissary of the court, and she is exempt. So the Gemara suggests, come in here a proof for Rav Yehuda's opinion from a Mishna. Bava Basra 99b. In a case where a public thoroughfare would pass through one's field, and he appropriated it and instead gave the public an alternative route on the side of his property. The law is that the route that he has given is the route that he gave them, and they may use it. But his property, which he appropriated, has not reached him, i.e., he cannot appropriate it for his personal use since it was already in public use. I have some property I hardly ever use. It's a field that's lying fallow. People have, worn a path through it to get from a village to the stream where everybody gets their water. And then one day I decide, you know what, I'm going to start using that land. And so I don't want people walking through it. You can walk around it. Here's the path you can now use. It's much longer. It's very inconvenient for the people of that village. Can I do this unilaterally? No, because they created an easement through my land since I didn't enforce it for a long time, and they became accustomed to walk that path. It's not so easy for me to shut off that field and not let them pass through it anymore once that easement was established by public use. And if you say that a person may take justice into his own hands, why does the owner of the field not have the right to close the thoroughfare? Since it is his property and he gave the public an alternative route, let him take a stick in his hand and sit by the side of the road, preventing the public from passing through. If you're saying he's not allowed to do that, it must be that Rav Nachman was wrong, and we're not permitted to take justice into our own hands. Rav Zevid said in the name of Rava, it is a rabbinic decree, lest he give them a circuitous route. Since the public has the right to pass through the field, as the Gemara will soon explain, the owner cannot appropriate their thoroughfare without giving the public a similar alternative route. Therefore, the sages decreed that he cannot appropriate it without their consent, lest he provide an inadequate option. Rav Maharshia said, the Mishnah is referring to a case where he actually gave them a circuitous route, a much longer route. So if one in fact gives the public a straight path, then he did not surrender his rights, and he may take justice into his own hands by blocking the original thoroughfare, as long as he gave them a viable alternative. Rav Ashi said any route on the side that the property owner might give them is necessarily considered a circuitous route, as it is close for this person and it is far for that person. While some will benefit from the change, it will be detrimental to others. So the Gemara asks, if so, why has his property not reached him? Right, his new route that he gave them, he doesn't get. I mean, the old route doesn't become his, even though he provides the new option. So why is that? If he cannot make the change, why can he not reclaim the path that he intended to turn over to the public? Let him say to them, take your original route and give me back. Oh, so they're saying, so if he gives them an alternative thoroughfare, so the public gets that and keeps the original thoroughfare. And so they're asking, well, okay, if they're not going to allow him to change from the old thoroughfare, then let him take back what he was offering in its place. Why is he not allowed to do that? He can say to them, take your original route and give me back my property so that he will not lose both pieces of land. And the Gemara answers that he cannot reclaim the alternative proposed land. He cannot reclaim it due to Rav Yehuda's statement. As Rav Yehuda says, with regard to a path that the mass is established as a public thoroughfare, it is prohibited to destroy it for them. Therefore, since the public began using his alternative route, the second route that he offered them, once they start using it, he can't take it back. So the Gemara suggests, come in here an alternative proof from a Baraisa. With regard to the owner of a field who left produce in the corner of the field, which is given to the poor, right? Pay, the corner that's left for the poor. And he left that on one side of the field. And poor people came and took from the other side. This produce and that produce are both considered paya. And if you say that a person may take justice into his own hands, why are this and that both considered peah? Let him take a stick and sit in his field on the side from which the poor people are taking produce without his permission, and let him warn them to take only from the side that he allocated for them. And Rav has said in terms of monetary law, he can prevent them from taking peah from the side that he did not allocate. What is meant by the ruling of this produce and that produce are both considered peah? It means that they are considered peah with regard to exempting both portions of produce from tithes. Just as the portion that the poor people took is exempt from tithes, so is the portion that he allocated initially. And this is as it is taught in Brisa. In the case of one who renounces ownership of his vineyard, and he arose early in the morning before anyone else took possession of it, and he harvested it, the one who renounces ownership is obligated in the mitzvah of individual fallen grapes left for the poor, known as peret, and in the mitzvah of incompletely formed clusters of grapes that are left for the poor, known as olelot, and in the mitzvah of forgotten clusters of grapes left for the poor, and in the mitzvah of peah, the 4 gifts to the poor that the Torah requires one to give from a vineyard. See Leviticus 19, verses 9 and 10. But he is exempt from the mitzvah to tithe his produce because this requirement does not apply to an ownerless field. It was his field. He declared it ownerless. He still harvested it, so he's obligated in peah, but it's not his field. He just harvested an ownerless field, and so he doesn't have to tithe what he harvested. And remember, once he declared it ownerless, okay, he harvested it, but somebody could have come along before him and taken it. Now that it's ownerless, it's not his field anymore. Likewise, in the above case, the portion of the field that was allocated for peah is exempt from tithes, even after the owner who claims it as peah is considered ownerless property in this regard. Did we prove or disprove Rav Nachman's contention that a person can take justice into his own hands to protect his property from imminent loss, and possibly even to protect his property even if there's not imminent loss? No. But the halakha did come out according to Rav Nachman, so the proof must have been somewhere else, the final proof. Or actually what it is that was Rav Nachman's position, and we generally follow Rav Nachman in cases of monetary law, and that's why the halakha is according to him in that regard. I'm just going to read Mishna number 2 here of chapter 1, short Mishna, and then I'll take some questions. If one's jug, this is Mishna number 2 of chapter 3. If one's jug broke in the public domain and another person slipped in the water from the jug and was injured from the fall, or if he was injured by the shards of the broken jug, the owner of the jug is liable. Rabbi Yehuda says in a case where the owner of the jug acted with intent, he is liable, and in a case where he acted without intent, he is exempt. Sounds like Rabbi Yehuda's in the minority on that. You create a hazard by leaving your broken, spilled stuff in the public domain and somebody gets hurt, you're liable. Seems to make pretty good sense, but we'll examine the nuances of that when we continue with page 28 tomorrow. To finish page 28 and move on to page 29. Okay, a couple of questions on Bava Kamma 27 and 28. First half of 28 anyway. Load. Sharon, is there any concept of proportional liability? Not always fully liable or not liable. I mean, we've seen half liable, both in the case of the innocuous ox, whether in private or public domain, and we've seen half liability, half damages in the case of pebbles. Right? You know, that go and break vessels when they're kicked up by an animal that is walking by. So we already have those precedents, and we'll see if we find others. Good question. Bill, now there's a good question. So is this a question of castle doctrine? For instance, I know in Arkansas, they have what's called a strong castle doctrine, which would hold, among other things, that you can, in fact, deck someone or even shoot someone who's trying to steal something out of your yard. And in Missouri, we have a moderate castle doctrine. You can punch him, but you can't shoot him unless he's inside your house, right? And here in California, you can't do anything to him unless he's got a gun and is about to shoot you, right? Then you can shoot him. Otherwise, just the fact that he's on your property, you can't physically harm him. So I guess that would be a non-castle doctrine, or the weakest form. Yeah, I mean, this is, let's see where we end up on this. So far, what we know is Rav Nachman's principle is law, that you can take justice into your own hands, certainly to prevent from imminent loss, but know that you will have to prove later that you had no alternative but to do that. And then if there was an imminent loss, but just he was on your property, I think that we're not clear on yet. Joe, what happens when the one struck with the hoe is hit by the metal head, causing major bodily injury? Can the injured party seek payment due to excessive force and permanent damage? Please note that my brother inadvertently hit me with a hoe, not knowing that I was behind him. I have a massive scar on my face as a reminder of this event. Wow. Yeah, I mean, we didn't seem to cover that. Right, the hoe, I think, we weren't really covering that case. It was incidental to just talk about the law of humiliation and when it is paid and when it is not. But when we're saying that you are, defending your property by taking bodily force, and then you apply excessive force, does it change the equation? It's a wonderful question, and we haven't answered it yet. So let's stay tuned for that answer. That's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Wednesday at the regular time.